I'm pretty confident that you're going to win. I mean, you can't guarantee it, but I feel like that's going to be a preserved thing, the right to grow your own cannabis for medical purposes, as it should be. And I think everybody should be able to grow, and really that's kind of what legalization means to me, is that farmers are growing cannabis at whatever potency they need to. That to me is final legalization. And if they can do it, you can do it in your backyard, but you probably wouldn't bother.
Okay, welcome back to another edition of Cannabis in Canada with Jason Wilcox. We're kicking it here at basically the Vancouver dispensary, Dana Larsen's location, upstairs. This is one of his offices of many. The man is very busy, has done a lot in the community. We have a lot of questions to run at him in this interview here. We're going to cover a lot of things, and this is just kind of a one-on-one, head-to-head with somebody who's been doing this. You got to remember, Dana goes all the way back to the beginning of, if you have it, the cannabis culture in BC, and I'd like to get into some of that. But first, Dana, welcome to the show again.
Hey Jason, thanks for having me. Well, it's good to be here and good to have you here, and thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Now the recent raids, we have to get into this because when the LPs came out, I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen to all these patients that are going to get displaced in BC? Because other provinces are like, well, we don't have clubs. Here we do. Now we have Joe Fort's and Jim's. You know, one was raided and they cut the plans. Jim's has been shut down, 2 Weeds locations. What is your take really on what the city's doing? That city investigators also going around to the clubs. What's your take on that?
Well, you know, Vancouver's got over 40 clubs now. It's hard to even keep track of how many there are because they're opening up very quickly, right? And this is a pretty recent phenomenon. When we opened here, we were the 3rd club in the city. That was 2008. And it's really picked up since then, the number of clubs that are opening. And so with over 40 clubs in the city, I mean, Vancouver's become the most tolerant city in Canada for medical marijuana access. There's some in Toronto, and there's a few in Victoria, and there's some scattered across the country. But you know, like they did, and actually there's been an earlier raid a couple of years ago. They raided, the first raid in the modern thing was iMedicaid when they got shut down, one of their 2 locations. And they eventually dropped their charges against him. And then more recently, we had 2 Weeds locations, although they're separate. Jim's Weeds isn't the same as the other Weeds. But we've had these things happening, and I think there's probably more raids to come, but I don't think it's part of an overall crackdown on all the dispensaries. But, you know, there's a gray line, or there's a fuzzy line, and we're kind of in a gray area. And we don't really know exactly what the things are. I don't think Jim knows exactly why he got raided. They said it was because some of his customers were reselling their cannabis. Well, if that's true, is that his fault? Or maybe they could have told him he could have done something about it, or maybe they should have gone after those people doing it and left him alone. You wouldn't raid a liquor store if somebody was reselling the beer to a kid outside. So there's questions there, and people don't really know, I think, what the rules are exactly, right? Don Briere's been in the media. He kind of runs the other Weeds, although they're franchised, so it's a little separate, but he's been saying he'll sell to anybody, a gram to anybody, whether or not they have a medical permit with them or a need that way. And he's been fine so far, but I feel like making those kind of comments in the media will probably get the cops to prioritize you. And I don't wish him any ill will, or don't really want to see anybody get raided, but I do feel like when you're pushing those boundaries, that's part of the risk involved, right? And so, you know, I've talked to a lot of dispensary operators, and after we opened, I've spent so many hours talking to people who want to open up dispensaries, and they come to me for free advice. And I try to tell them, you know, it's up to you to do what you want, but I strongly recommend you follow our model, you take our forms and copy them, because we've created something that can be successful that the city will let go. If you want to push it, you can do that, but there might be a pushback, and certainly that's a risk, right? So, I don't want to see anybody getting raided. I want to see patients to get their medicine. I think it's good in some ways, people pushing the boundaries like that, but I think it's also worrisome, and that I don't want there to be a big backlash in all of us. But I don't feel like the city of Vancouver is going to do that. I think they've got a nuanced enough opinion of things to not use one dispensary as a reason to come after everybody. And so I think, I don't like seeing any of those individual folks get raided or have problems, but overall I don't feel like that we're all in danger. I think like they're going to try to pick off the people that are on the wrong side of that gray line. Whether or not they get the right ones or they're justified, that's a different question, but I think that's what they're trying to do.
No, that gray line, that's a good point, because this comes down to that incorporated nonprofit. following some sort of governance, checking prescriptions, of the patients, no backdooring medicine. These are the kind of basic models, and of course having trained staff, etc. Following a protocol that is, again, in that as best a legal gray area as we can get. Is that fair to?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons I'm involved in a group called CAMCD, the Canadian Association of Medical Cannabis Dispensaries. And we've created an organization that can certify dispensaries. We've got a set of protocols and standards that we've got, and quite a system of how to get a dispensary certified under our system. And we're not even certified here. No one's certified yet. We've just started that process because it's got to be for everybody. But we're among about 8 or 9 dispensaries now that are going through that process, which isn't a ton, but that's about 10-20% of the total number in Vancouver, across Canada, and I'd say that. So the more come in, the better. But I think it's an organization that we can help to see if you've got that certification standard from CAMCD, then this is a place that you can trust to have certain standards and certain protocols in place.
How do you feel it will impact you if the licensed producers who are soliciting the provincial government right now to cover their LP weed, what if they get that coverage under provincial formularies and say no to dispensaries like yourself? Oh,
they probably would say no to us, I bet, under that system, because we're not in any kind of system part of the Health Canada thing, right? And so it's questionable. Although I have seen some cases, like there was a fellow in Maple Ridge who had a case where he got his medical cannabis paid for, but only at $5 a gram. So they capped it at that amount. He said he was paying more than that, and they said, well, the judge said, we'll cover it for $5 a gram, but you're paying more than that. So they could do something like that, where they give them a flat rate towards their medicine, which they could get anywhere. That could work for us. But ultimately, we're going to be shut out a lot of those kind of things, I think. But, in the long run, if there's a legal system where patients can get cheaper, higher quality, better variety of cannabis than we can provide here, and we have to go out of business, then we won. That's a victory for us, because that's what our goal is. I don't really need to be doing it myself, and in the long run, this place may not exist under legalization. It may not be needed anymore. And that would be maybe my employees might be unhappy about that, but I think that would be a victory for us if it came down to that.
But do you feel that that's a victory in the sense of, say, cannabinoid profiles and strain efficacies? Because if LPs are offering 60 strains only and saying this will fix all, after Prairie Plant Systems failed with one strain, and you understand very much strain efficacies and the effects that different strains have.
We'll still be needed in that case. These are some of the different strains that we carry. We normally have a pretty incredible selection of different bud varieties, and so we got everything from $4 a gram up to $8 a gram. $8 a gram is usually our highest price. Very rarely do we have anything more than that. We have specials usually as well. If you buy a larger quantity, you can get certain deals on different varieties, but people can see them if they want. They can smell it. We usually encourage them just to have a little hole. You can just take a little smell or just see what the buds are presented like there. But I think we have one of the best menus for different cannabis varieties in the city. We also got all of our different extracts and kiff and hash and that kind of stuff. We don't really sell the butane type extracts. I'm not a big fan of those products. If they're made in a lab, I wouldn't mind so much, but I think they can be quite dangerous to produce and not always very healthy to consume. So we do sell some extracts, but they're usually not made with butane. Usually it's isopropyl alcohol or different methods. Yeah, this is our menu in our dispensary. We have a lot of, as you noticed when you looked there originally, cookies and edible products. We have all kinds of tinctures and sprays. A few drops or spray under your tongue can be quite effective. This honey is an amazing product, just a teaspoon in a cup of tea. It's very effective for relaxation and sleeping, and very smooth and tastes really nice. That's our menu, and on these hot days we sell a lot of that lemonade, nice cool drink infused with the honey, and it's easy to consume and very pleasant.
How do you feel about the LP position on that? Because
I think
from a greed point, it seems,
yeah,
on the true medical point.
Well, I agree with a lot of that, but to be fair, there's hundreds and hundreds of potential LPs who haven't been licensed yet, and I know some of them are people who I know who have good intentions. I feel kind of sorry for them because I think they're getting into a nightmare situation with Health Canada. But I wouldn't say that all the people who are applying for LPs are all necessarily only motivated by cash. I think definitely some of them are, and I think some of them are people who love marijuana and want to help people and think they can do that best by complying with the system, right?
No,
so I wouldn't,
but I would say I have friends as well, and they're the ones that seem to get blocked. They seem to get to level 5 and get cut off.
There's a lot of folks out there who have invested a lot of time and money in getting a place and hiring people and doing stuff, and now they're twiddling their thumbs, spending money every day doing nothing because they haven't got a permit from Health Canada.
Exactly.
And even those that have got permits are mostly just, I think, trashing their own reputations because they don't have enough cannabis to sell. And I see all the time people posting, oh, I got with so-and-so, and they sent me some pot, and it wasn't terrible, but now I can't get any more, and I can't, and I hate them now, and screw those guys. And so the ones that are out there are not generating a lot of positive will among their clients, you know. And I've seen different reviews, and some of them have got better pot than others, and some of them, you know, are packaging it better than others and not having it turn to shake when it arrives. But they've got a lot of work to do, I think, to get the industry where it is, and they're really struggling. And Health Canada is not making it easy for anybody.
I want to throw a hypothetical at you. Know, let's just say we go to trial next year and we lose. Do you think a gas war is going to break out between the underground, the people who understand these strain efficacies and what's important, and these licensed producers, who I agree ultimately over time will morph into a legalization model? But for the medical patients in the meantime, do you see that happen? Because I'm worried about what's going to happen, win, lose, or draw next year after trial.
Well, I'm pretty confident that you're going to win. I mean, you can't guarantee it, but I feel like that's going to be a preserved thing, the right to grow your own cannabis for medical purposes, as it should be. And I think everybody should be able to grow, and really that's kind of what legalization means to me, is that farmers are growing cannabis at whatever potency they need to. That to me is final legalization. And if they can do it, you can do it in your backyard, but you probably wouldn't bother. But I do kind of worry about the LPs because I think that cannabis is only really profitable. Indoor grown marijuana buds are only really profitable under prohibition model. And that is if you can grow your own, and if it's fully legalized in the real way and farmers can grow it and stuff, then indoor buds are going to become not the same as they are now, not the most popular product.
It'll be more like a wine connoisseur.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that smoking like pot, I mean, I like smoking joints. It's my preferred means of ingesting cannabis. But I think that for most people, that's not going to be the thing. And smoking joints is difficult to do indoors. You can't do it. Most people can't do it in their workplace. You can't do it publicly. You can't do it around kids. People judge you if you smell like pot. If you could use a tincture or a capsule that gave you the same effects of cannabis medicinally and pleasurably and all those things, then people would, I think, tend to gravitate towards those forms. And under legalization, those things could become much more available and really dialed in a way that even different strains can't compare to. Different strains can have certain cannabinoid profiles, but if you could extract that stuff and make your own blend, then you can make things that were, you know, anywhere from pure THC to, and including all the flavonoids and terpenoids, all those things could be extracted too and re-blended together. You could have all terpenoid blends for whatever purposes. I don't know what you'd use that for, but I bet there's a need for it. But I do think that's going to be good about these LPs is that it helps normalize marijuana. It helps show that it's mainstream. I think it does bring us closer to full legalization because people kind of see the hypocrisy if only they can sell it. And I think they're all going to turn around and become lobbyists against Health Canada for them to make a better system. Because if I had one of those licenses, I would want to be able to sell extracts, and I would want to be able to sell all the other things. And so I would start lobbying for that and making that happen and pushing for the rules to be broadened. And so I think that could be a good thing, but I think it's maybe a mixed bag. But I would say overall, I'm glad that we're having that is making it happen because everyone's talking about it and it's a discussion, and some patients will help them get their medicine too, I think, and they will help some people.
That needs to happen.
Yeah, and they will help some people. I'm not against the idea of LPs existing. I just don't think they should be the only model. You should also have other models available as well. And one of them should be mail order cannabis and extracts for medical purposes, but I think it should be a non-prescription medication. It's safer than other things, or most of them should be non-prescription, most extracts. Maybe some really strong things or certain ones should be different, but anyways.
Well, we'll see how the courts turn out and a lot of that goes down. So let's jump back 5 years now. You and I go back a long ways, and of course yourself and Marc goes back much further. Marc Emery coming home. You're a good buddy. You know, you guys have really held it down for the Emery camp. Jodie's done a great job. He's coming home. What's your take on all this? And what do you think Marc's take's going to be, not only on the patient's position around their gardens, but around legalization models, such as with your gardens and extractions?
Well, first of all, yeah, I've known Marc for 20 years or more. I was actually doing cannabis activism in Vancouver before Marc came here, but he really shook things up and took it to another level and pretty much ended up hiring everybody who was already an activist, all got absorbed into the Marc Emery business model machine, and we all became better at it, and because he would help to fund things, it really transformed stuff a lot. And he went to jail for selling bongs and pipes. He's got a conviction for promoting vaporizers. The only person in Canada ever convicted under 462.2 for promoting vaporizers. It's a bizarre, kind of charges. He got convicted for trafficking in a gram of pot one time. The cops hated him so much, or a gram of hash. The cops hated him so much that this American tourist came up and visited Vancouver back when the Cannabis Cafe was going. And Marc, this guy came up and he was a big fan of Marc. He brought his adult son with him as well, and they were hanging out in the cafe. Marc gave him a gram of hash to have. And the guy's like, I'm not going to smoke this. Marc Emery gave me this gram of hash. I'm going to keep this gram of hash forever. So he puts it in his pocket, crosses the border into the U.S., gets stopped, gets caught with the gram of hash. The cops shake him down, or the customs guys shake him down. He confesses, Marc Emery gave it to me. So they wanted to get Marc so badly, they paid to fly this guy back to Vancouver. They charged Marc with trafficking in a gram of hash. I remember Marc telling me that during the trial thing, the guy couldn't look at Marc because he was his hero and he'd been forced to betray him, but they probably threatened his whole livelihood and his family and everything else. And Marc, nothing happened to him. He got a fine and he just went on. Marc didn't really care, but it really kind of just showed how badly they hated Marc for having his vaporizers and his bong sales and his seeds, that they went to these extremes. And then they finally got him by getting the American agents involved.
Well, that was that. Now, on that note, I believe you might have been with his entourage that night when they heckled the DEA agent, because that's Marc up in your
That's
face.
right. No, absolutely. I mean, Marc's
that warrant seemed to come out just after that incident.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of factors that were going on, but definitely heckling the drug czar, Jon Walters, when he came to Vancouver. He's one of the highest ranking officials in the White House. He's not used to being heckled, and the Vancouver Board of Trade had him here speaking, and Marc, being a local businessman, bought a table, and I went with David Levine and Chris Bennett. I think it was just the four of us. And absolutely, whenever Jon Walters said something that was a lie, which is pretty much every second sentence, we'd all liar, boo, or whatever, or yelling out the truth and stuff. And actually, before they talked, Marc went up. Jon Walters was getting his hand shaken with everybody and photos and that. And Marc went up and shook his hand, and they kind of got a picture. And he was like, "Here are you?" Marc was like, "Oh, I'm the Prince of Pot." Marc. And, Jon Walters jumped back like he'd seen the devil or something. Burned his hand there. And absolutely, he might not have really known who Marc Emery was before that night, but he knew afterwards, and they started a lot of their investigation and stuff after that. But there was a lot of, Marc was definitely in the media a lot, Wall Street Journal front page, CNN, and pretty much whenever he was in American media in a big way, they'd come and get him in Canada and raid him and stuff. But the courts, which is good, did not want to put someone in jail for selling bongs and pipes or for selling marijuana seeds. They would just give him a fine.
Well, and it's similar to Tommy. Didn't they do something similar to Tommy? They put an agent into his facility to actually get...
Well, with Tommy Chong, what happened was no one ships bongs. I think it's Pennsylvania. There's 2 American states with really harsh bong laws. And so you don't mail order bongs to those states, and nobody does. But they wanted to get Tommy, and his son, Paris, had opened up Chong bongs and was sticking his dad's face on it and making a family business out of it. And these guys tried, they called over and over again to get them shipped bongs there, and they said, no, we don't do that. Then they flew undercover agents in saying, we're opening a store there, buying a bunch of stuff. And then they accidentally forgot a bunch of the boxes behind, and then spent weeks and weeks calling, begging for them to please mail us the stuff. Finally, somebody gave in and shipped them to them, and that broke the law, and then they went. So, I mean, it wasn't like they were going out of their way to ship bongs there. They really forced them into it or tricked them into it, and then they raided them with guns drawn and stuff, and it was actually part of a huge operation. They went after a lot of glass blowers.
There's a helicopter over his house.
When they came there, yeah, it was a full-on aggressive kind of raid at his place over bongs, and they went after a lot of other bong dealers, but he was the only guy that went to jail. And they brought up, just like with Marc, they bring up his political activities and his fundraising and his propaganda magazine, Cannabis Culture, which I was proud to do, for 10 years. And with Tommy Chong, they brought up his movies and his making fun of the police in his movies. movies and stuff, and he got a 9-month jail sentence. And but you know, Tommy Chong has become a great supporter of Marc Emery. He wears his Free Marc T-shirt pretty much every TV interview he does on all kinds of things. He's always wearing that shirt, and I think that's really good. That I think for Tommy, going to jail, I think turned him into an activist. I don't think he was really like that before. He was a comedian and he liked pot, but I think that transformed him and gave him some gravitas too, because he's got street cred now. I got a 9-month sentence for selling bongs or whatever. Like I think it helped. I think it's good. I think it made him way more powerful and be taken more seriously, and kind of turned him into a real voice for legalization. He's been much more media stuff since then than before. And for Marc also, it's like the Darth Vader, Obi-Wan thing. You know, you strike him down, he becomes more powerful than ever before. And Marc, when he comes back, will have more media attention, more support, more power politically than he's ever had in his career. You know, have less money and less, you know, that kind of stuff, but his voice will be louder than it's ever been.
He's also now, in my own opinion, again, you know, there's a martyrism sort of, as you say, to doing time, taking a 5-year hit for seeds for the culture and showing, and those that don't know Marc need to look up some of these things that we're discussing, because he was that frontline activist like yourself, getting in their face and taking those hits, and you know, whether it's a night in jail or whether it's 5 years, you know, in this case it was the worst of the possible political prisoner.
Yeah,
would you say that's...
Yeah, pretty much Marc, like I would say that he wasn't the very first, but he was the first in a big way to start selling bongs and pipes and get those out there. He is responsible, like in that 3-year period when Hemp BC was open, about 24 other stores all open in Canada. They all pretty much got their wholesale stuff from him, and it wasn't him doing it, it was individuals out there doing it, but his example and his leadership in the article he wrote, How to Open a Head Shop, or How to Open a Hemp Store, was very influential. And same with the seeds. You know, he was the first guy to do it in Canada. I don't think we'd have any other seed banks in Canada if Marc hadn't opened that door up. And so that whole thing, I think, was really his pushing it out and catching. It was the zeitgeist of the moment. People were into it, and he really caught that and led it. And so I think it was very transformative for all of Canada. And the $4 million that he put into the movement over that time, all around the world, a lot of it in Canada and the US, but also all around the world. And you know, I've talked to like Mason Tvert, the guy who was really the chief engineer of legalization in Colorado, and he definitely cites Marc as an inspiration and someone that when he was getting started, he, you know, heard about Marc and read his stuff, and that inspired him to do some of the things he was doing. And so you never really know the effects that you have, but certainly Marc inspired a lot of people, and myself included. You know, I think I kind of helped the second wave of dispensaries get going, building on the work of the BC Compassion Club Society and others, and even Hillary, who opened the first Compassion Club. She used to work for Marc Emery. I think she was working for Marc as manager of his store when she would bicycle around Vancouver, first person selling medical marijuana off her bike, basically the backpack of weed, doing home delivery. And that, she laid the seeds that created the BC Compassion Club. And then, you know, we built on that and kind of launched the second wave, and now there's, you know, 40 places, and it's bigger than any of us could. So anyways, yeah, Marc had a lot of influence on that, and having him come back is going to be huge. And I hope that he can use his power wisely to make, you know, positive change happen. And I feel like we're closer than ever. It seemed like a dream kind of 20 years ago when we started that we'd ever change these laws, really.
You feel that Marc's going to feel a little bit of culture shock just coming back and saying, holy cow, now there's this whole new sort of different acceptance.
I think he's going to love it, though, really. I mean, he's going to be pretty well known. Although I have to say, at the Pride Parade the other day, a couple of people, I was smoking joints, were like, hey, welcome home, Marc. Or they see me and they just know some weed guys there or whatever. I was like, no, not quite, but whatever. He'll be home soon. Good, as long as you're, you know, on the right spirit, that's fine. But yeah, I think it's going to be great for him to be back. I think he's going to be busier than ever. I think it'll be very different for him, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start selling seeds again. I mean, I wouldn't send him to the States if I was him, but there's a pretty established seed market in Canada, and he's kind of the #1 known name in that business. Marc Emery's Direct Seeds. He might do that. I don't really know for sure what his plans are, but I do know that he's going to Europe for a month in September. He's been asked to come and speak at the Spanish Cannabis Business Conference and a few other things, and I expect he's probably going to spend a lot of his time just traveling around talking to people because he's kind of that celebrity. He's the voice of the movement, or you know, one. And yeah, and I think that people, and he's a fun, entertaining speaker who's got a lot of interesting things to say. Now he's got, you know, 4 more years or 4.5 years of prison anecdotes and stuff as well. And he plays bass guitar as well, which I'm very amazed by. He'd never played a musical instrument in his life, and he said he was going to learn a new language in prison, and he learned the language of music. And I've sent him so many music books and things, and he's performed with a really interesting, rotating group of musicians because they have prison bands, but as you can imagine, the lineups change a lot as prisoners come and go or get sent to solitary or whatever. But he can play a lot of songs, and I would love to hear him play. I'm looking forward to having him doing some bass.
He always judged a man when I look at his crew and the people around him, and his crew respect him, and they held it down while he was away. And Jodie especially, holding it down and really advancing in what she's doing, and seeing her now run for the Liberal Party, I think it's just, that's going to lead me right into the next discussion. Is going to be political, but of course, big ups to the entire Emery camp and your crew for holding all that down and for doing what you have for the cause.
Well, and Jodie has grown tremendously into her role as really being a major spokesperson for the movement. And she's, you know, it's not easy what she's doing. She spends so much of her time on the road, flying out. And they put Marc in the furthest possible prison in the middle, other side of the country, in the middle of the nowhere. And she flies out there pretty much every 2 weeks to go visit him, and as well as all the other active speaking and stuff she does. And she's a great media personality. She's very attractive. She's very well spoken, and so they, you know, they love having her on camera. And she's been really fabulous. And now she's seeking the Liberal nomination in Vancouver East. And that's something I've got mixed feelings about, actually. It's interesting. You know, I'm an NDP member, although I'm not really a partisan type person. I want a lot of change. I don't really care who does it. You know, I don't really hate other people in other parties. There's conservatives that are very pro-legalization, and I think that's great. You know, Scott Reid is a conservative MP who's kind of the lone wolf in the caucus who advocates for legalization quite openly and speaks about it, and I think that's great. You know, if there was more conservatives like him, then maybe we'd be in a different situation. And certainly, you know, there's things there that I can agree with. But Trudeau has come out for legalization in a big way. And you know, the thing about pot is that it dominates. It's such a sexy issue that whenever you talk about it, it takes over everything else. I think that's been the NDP's fear, and the challenge that I always had in the NDP was that people would support the idea of legalization. Everyone agreed it was a good idea. It would always pass. Whenever it got to a vote, it would always pass by a big margin. But the powers that be know that if you adopt that issue, that's the one that's going to be the media headline. We've seen it with Trudeau. I mean, who knows? There's 2 or 3 other things you can name. But at their policy convention, when they passed the marijuana, they passed dozens of other policies, but only one got the headline, was the marijuana issue. And I think for him, it's probably good timing, and it's going to help him because marijuana legalization is seeming more and more inevitable with Washington and Colorado legalizing. Alaska is going to go, maybe Oregon, others, you know, Washington, D.C. is decriminalized. So I think he's a bit ahead of the curve, but that's probably a good place to be. But with the NDP, it was always a real struggle to get them to fully adopt this as a final thing. Or when they would do it, and we did pass a resolution at the last Vancouver convention that actually, if you read it, calls for legalization of all drugs, basically, or to end all prohibition and to have a commission figure out how best to legalize everything and what the right rules and regulations are to be for a non-punitive model for psychoactive substance use. But they always write it in such language that, you know, a non-punitive model for psychoactive substance use really means legalization of all drugs, which is a great policy, but they will never articulate that. Marc Emery will never say, yes, we advocate for, you know, that kind of model of people being able to access heroin with a prescription or something, perhaps. That could be legalization for that, or allowing, you know, coca extracts in some way or something. Those things are not. So anyways, I don't know. It's been a challenge, but for me, I'm very glad the Liberals are saying what they're saying. I've been invited to speak at more Liberal events about marijuana and drug policy than I have at NDP events, which I think is pretty telling. And a lot of it is especially is coming out of Vancouver East. Libby Davies is the MP there right now. She has been Parliament's most outspoken person on marijuana and drug policy, I think, of any party ever, really. And she normally wins with over half of the popular vote, so she's probably going to win again. I think she's pretty much got a lock-in. Jodie hasn't, I think Jodie's announced that she wants to run, but she still has to actually win the nomination. So it'll be up to the Liberals in that riding to pick who they want. The president and vice president, I think, are both supporting her, or at least I think that's their role. So she's got, you know, inner people in the group, but she'll have to sign up a lot of new members. And I think that she's a good candidate for some reasons, maybe a scary one for others. So we'll see how it goes. But whether or not she gets the nomination, her and Marc will be promoting the Liberal Party. For Sensible BC in BC, which is where I'm really focused, and I think this might segue into your next thing almost. So I think, yeah. So this might tie in, but you know, our Sensible BC group, which is really where I'm focused more than within the NDP right now. I'm still an NDP member, but Sensible BC is a nonpartisan group. We have Greens and Liberals and Conservatives and non-voters and everybody, every political persuasion in there. And that's as it should be, right?
Well, Sensible BC, that's your focus, and I like what you guys are doing now. Now we're fighting them on the federal level. I believe your direction's on the provincial level.
Well, no, it's not actually. We're actually right now. It's at other two levels. We're focused municipally and then federally. I mean, we are strongest in BC. You know, 95% of our members are in BC, and that's what we're focused at. But and we launched originally, as you know, to do a referendum in British Columbia because we weren't getting any traction federally. Possession arrests have doubled in British Columbia in that time, and we wanted to make the point the province could do something and hopefully actually get the referendum out there and make it happen. But we're not focusing on the referendum right now. What we're going to be doing is this fall, we've got municipal elections in British Columbia all across the province. And as we see, comparing Vancouver to almost any other city, the municipal government makes a big difference in how things go. And you know, there's a dispensary in Maple Ridge, that's RCMP territory. They've been open for years. I think it's because of the mayor, and the mayor was very favorable. People opened one in New West, they busted them, and the mayor was not very favorable. The mayor and council make a big difference. And so we're going to be focused municipally, where there's very low turnouts as well. Normally you only get 30% turnout municipally, so a smaller dedicated group can have a bigger impact by getting in there. So we're going to target certain cities and towns. We're going to try to defeat some bad mayors and elect and re-elect some good ones, and try to make marijuana policy an issue municipally, where they actually pay for a lot of this enforcement municipally. They pay for the policing, at least for a good chunk of it, and they want more say in how that policing money is spent, including the RCMP. And we just renegotiated the RCMP contract, and the municipalities are supposed to have more control over the RCMP because of that. So we want some mayors that are going to flex their muscle and say, we want you to stop possession arrest, stop spending so much money on marijuana, let's spend our money on real crime and focus our police resources better.
And equally, this is kind of where what you're doing crosses paths with what I'm trying to foresee for patients. Once we win our right to grow, there's always going to be that municipal laws that keep impeding patients' right to access over, again, bylaws. So that's where parties like yourselves or groups like yourselves, stuff that you're doing in Sensible BC is going to definitely help medical patients and other patients and people alike once we legalize.
Absolutely.
If there's going to be gardens, because that seems to be, I've went through, as you know, lawsuits and other things with municipal authorities over my garden. Well, so I see that as being an ongoing thing. Even once we win the right, you know, that right to reasonable access is going to be questionable, and then there's always going to be all these other provincial and subsidiary laws, like down to municipal levels, where I used to call them bully by bylaws. This is why I say, well, what's kind of your forecast for medical patients that you serve now that may have grow licenses? I
think it's going to be stormy because municipalities typically don't like home cultivation, and I understand where they're coming from, although I think there's better ways of solving it. And actually one of the things, and I wanted to get to this in a minute, but one of the things I want to do with Sensible BC over the rest of this year is I want to write the laws that we want to see passed, not just federally, but provincially and municipally. I want to get together with people like you and other people who are stakeholders or leaders in this movement and other groups and write what we think are appropriate bylaws. What is the right bylaw for a city to have around medical? Should there be, we can't look at it at all? Should you have to pay a little fee and have someone come and inspect it? Should there be a permit? What should the rule be about that? And to try to come up with something that we can write that makes people that we like as people who are in the movement, but that also would make your neighbor feel comfortable that the guy growing cannabis next door is not going to result in him having something bad happen in his house because he's got that happening next door. That everybody can feel safe and comfortable, because you should be able to feel safe and comfortable. And and people shouldn't have to be scared about that stuff. And there should, I think, be some rules in place. I don't know exactly what those rules are or what the details should be, but I think we can come up with something that's like that. And I think we do need some, if you're going to be growing, you know, and having electricity and water and things in your house, I'm happy to have some rules around that, as long as they're fair and not punitive and not biased or whatever. Like,
what's your take on this? This has been one of my problems from the beginning. Hobby growers, they grow exotic plants and herbs, they sell them at the stores, and they use the same equipment, but they're allowed to keep growing with impunity from insurance and discrimination. But yet the cannabis plant spontaneously combusts and causes mold so much that we need to police it in the essence of a plant.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of misinformation and fear around cannabis cultivation that isn't needed to be there. But there's also some real concerns too, I think. Like I've seen people growing at home who are immaculate professionals. I see folks growing at home who do a bad, and I see people trash their home who aren't growing any cannabis there either, right? So I mean, all kinds of things can happen. But there should be some rules. I'm not sure exactly what those are, and I need wiser minds and a broader. But I think we should, because if we don't write them, they're going to write their own. And I think that we need to write the law we want to see the federal government pass, and what we want to see provinces do. It's going to be all three levels of government, and there's a lot of questions that we need to answer, not just like around, you know, if we're going to legalize it, can you grow at home, how much, how do we regulate that, how do we deal with drug testing or impairment at work or impaired driving, how do we deal with kids, how do we do age limit. There's a lot of questions to be answered, and they're not necessarily all that unsolvable, but I think we need to come up with what we think are the right rules and to try to get as many stakeholders as possible. I did that with Sensible BC and the Sensible Policing Act, and we got I think it came out a lot better in the end, and a lot of groups were like, well, we like it, but can you rephrase that part, or can you change that? But as a result, we got a really big consensus of people to support it. And I think that because we're getting close to legalization, and we as a movement and as those who really understand the cannabis plant, who know what the real concerns are, like making butane extracts in your own home, I'm happy to have a law against that. I think that's, you know, exactly, yeah. So there's some parts of the culture that can be dangerous and that need regulation, but making bubble hash in your own home, that should be allowed. It should not, but the law treats those things exactly the same. Mandatory minimum sentence for manufacturing marijuana extract. And so it's, yeah, so it makes no difference. But I would like to see different kind of rules around those kind of things, for instance. And that's something that us in the marijuana culture, we understand making water hash is different than making a butane extract. But some senator or some parliamentarian has no idea what you're talking about, right? So ban it all.
So education, Sensible's platform, Sensible's platform is educate. Like, we've been doing this for years as activists, but it's good to see that, and I agree with what you're saying. We need to see this collective come together, because this federal fight's going to end, and the ongoing fight is there until the dust fully settles, and we can only do this collectively. The government's done a good job at separating recreational versus medical. I say we all use the same plant, use that as a starting ground of common ground, and let's work together to finish what we started many years ago, because there's people trying to buy what people like yourself and I have built, and others. And we built a culture, we built a people, whether it's medical, whether it's recreational, whatever people want to call it. We all love the plant, and I think that that's something moving forward I think would be huge. I'd like to get your take on that, because what I hear is a collective push forward, and I think Canada needs to hear that.
Yeah, well, I think that, to me, legalization doesn't mean that a minority of people can grow cannabis and sell it to everybody else. You know, I always like the wine model of cannabis. I think there should, in the beginning especially, I think over time, things will lighten up, just like we're seeing now. The wine and alcohol laws are lightening up from laws that were put in place from alcohol prohibition, and, you know, decades and decades ago. So I think that the model I want to see is the wine model, where you can grow some cannabis at home for yourself, and you can buy it in a store, and that it's properly labeled and properly, you know, the potency and everything is on there. If it's organic, it should be labeled as organic. You have some faith in that. If you want to grow some plants in your backyard or in your home and share them with your friends, like apple pie or whatever, that's fine with me. And there should be some kind of limit to begin with. Maybe we won't need one in the long run, but to start off with, there's going to be a limit of 6 plants or 12 plants, or, you know, 4 square meters or something like that.
Well,
or
we are
you know,
to be fair, we are reversing 70 years of reefer madness. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, well, I'm an incrementalist. You know, as long as you're going in the right direction, I think it takes time. You're not going to get it all at once. The gay rights movement didn't start with, we want gay marriage today. It was, we just want to be able to be open about who we are and not get beat up and discriminated and fired from our jobs. And, you know, the black equality, or the ending of slavery, is we want to have a black person as president right away. No, it takes a while, and there's still a lot of work to be done in both those areas. And we, you know, we're not going to get, as long as we're going in the right direction, we're not going to get it all at once. Even when marijuana is legalized federally, there's still going to be bylaws against it. There's still going to be discriminatory drug testing. There's still going to be other ways that cannabis users are punished against other people. That's not going to end all at once. But changing the law is the big change that has to happen, and then the other social things to take a little longer in the long run. But I just wanted to add a lot about Sensible BC and what we're doing, because we're focused municipally. We're going to focus federally in the next election. And really what came out of our referendum campaign was a lot of people in a big organization, and I think we're like the biggest marijuana reform group in Canada in terms of how many volunteers, how big our email list is, how many people we can reach out to and who were involved in our group. And we're pretty much all in BC, but we've got some pretty big numbers now, and we're able to get people out to, and a lot of our work is just keeping our mailing list going. So we have folks at the Pride Parade with our sign-up sheet, get people's emails and phone numbers. Do you want to volunteer? Do you want to help out? And we're able to bring out dozens of people and make things happen, and have a lot of contacts. If we want to call people, we've got people that will do phone calling and reaching out to people. And we're also doing training sessions and bringing people around to get groups together and teaching them how to politically engage and how to talk to people, how to communicate, how to do this stuff. So we're really kind of building an army with this organization that we've got. And we're going to be having a big convention conference event in Vancouver the first weekend of October. And we're hoping to get about 200 folks to come out. Registration isn't open yet, but it's going to be open very soon. I'll be talking, of course. Marc Emery's going to come and talk. We've got a few other people who are going to be speaking. We're still putting the details, and I don't want to give away all our stuff yet, but it's going to be a great event with a lot of fun. We've got some great entertainment lined up for the evenings as well. And so anybody who's watching this, if you're in BC or anywhere in Canada and you want to come and check this out, sensiblebc.ca is the place to go. But check our Facebook page as well, and you'll be hearing about the details about this event. And we're training everybody up for the municipal elections this fall. And then our big goal is to defeat the Conservatives in BC federally next year. And so we're going to be endorsing and working for the candidates who we feel are the most marijuana friendly and who have the best chance of being elected. And we'll be trying to mobilize our people to have an impact in as many ridings as possible. And I think in British Columbia, especially one of the most marijuana-friendly provinces in Canada, this is an issue that's going to be big in the next federal election. It was a big issue in the by-elections with against the Liberals and the Conservatives. Really, the NDP is kind of staying out of it. You know, they've got decriminalization as a policy. Mulcair's not talking about it very much, or what that decriminalization really means. But it's become a slinging battle between the Liberals and the Conservatives on this issue. And in the last by-elections, we had 4 by-elections, 2 in Ontario, 2 in Alberta. The Conservatives won both the Alberta ones, but the Liberals did a lot better than they expected. The Ontario ones, one was a Liberal seat and one was Olivia Chow's old NDP seat. The Liberals took them both, and they were flooded with letters from the Conservatives with pictures of Justin Trudeau next to a kid smoking a joint, and Justin Trudeau wants to get your kids high and make marijuana available, and he did better in all 4 by-elections and took one. So that shows that their anti-marijuana rhetoric is backfiring on them, but they're doubling down on it. They're hitting it hard. So this federal election is going to be, I think, a marijuana election more than any other way. And if either Trudeau or the Conservatives, Harper, wins, they're going to have a mandate to act on that marijuana policy. If Trudeau gets elected after an election campaign, when the Conservatives say Trudeau's going to legalize marijuana, don't vote for him, and then he wins, well, he's got a pretty good mandate to legalize marijuana. No one could say it was a sneaky thing they didn't know about, right? And I think by the time we get to next fall, Alaska's going to legalize this year. Oregon might. I said Washington, D.C. is decriminalized. Half of America, one less than half of American states have got some kind of medical marijuana program in place, and that's going to expand and be more by then. So I think it was a very wise strategic decision on Trudeau's part to call for legalization. I think he's a bit ahead of the curve. Only 1/3 of Canadians support legalization, 1/3 support decrim, whatever that means, and 1/3 support kind of the status quo roughly, or I guess about half of them don't care of that last 1/3, and then half support the status quo. So it's really a minority that support it. But I think that legalization number is going to grow. I think it's going to get bigger.
In closing, Dana, if we legalize, do you believe it should be in the hands of the federal government to police marijuana, or should it be handed down to the provinces?
I think it has to be handed down to the provinces. I mean, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but my understanding is this provincial jurisdiction, once the federal government takes out the prohibition, removes it from the Controlled Drug and Substances Act, they probably put it into the Food and Drug Act. The federal government would maintain jurisdiction over things like importing and exporting. They might be able to tax it in some way if they pass a special tax. I don't know. They might try to do that. But the things around age limits and points of sale and all the things that are alcohol and tobacco issues, like the same kind of stuff, is provincial jurisdiction, so it'd be up to the provinces. And if I was the federal government, I'd kind of like that, because that's the nitty-gritty where there's arguments and debates, and they can just get out of that. They can just say, we're going to allow it, we'll let each province decide what they want to do, and it'll be good in a way because there'll be different models in each province, and it'll be kind of an experiment to see which model works best, and there'll be different options, and they can look at each other and see what works best. But I imagine that it'll end up like alcohol after 5 or 10 years, where they all pretty much settle on the same thing. I think every province has an age limit within 1 year of each other as to how old you can drink. They're all pretty much exactly the same. There's a few variant rules, but it's all pretty similar, and I expect it'll settle down to something like that after time. But I really think it's going to be provincial and municipal where they make those decisions, and that's going to be ultimately what Sensible BC will be doing once they legalize federally. We'll be working provincially to try to get them to pass the best possible laws provincially, and that's one of the things I want to do at our convention, is to write those laws and put them in place. And if you're interested in that, if you can't make it to the convention, but feel free, if you have input on to stay involved. Well, sensiblebc.ca, yeah, sensiblebc.ca is the place to go. If you can't make it to the convention, there'll still be options for people to get involved in helping to formulate these kind of laws, coming up with a consensus-driven model as to what the marijuana laws should be in a legalization, ending of prohibition kind of system. So that's part of our goal. But yeah, check our website out, and thanks so much for being here and having me.
As always, very informative, Dana Larsen, and we will have him on in the future as we continue in the cannabis wars. Thank you, Dana.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.